we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If everyone would stand for a moment of silence, and then we'll have the pledge. Madam Recorder, if you'd call the roll.
Chairman Floyd.
Present.
Vice Chair Harrison. Deborah Thomas.
Present.
Jeremy Burnett. Michelle Childs. And Superintendent Horrell.
Here.
Do have a quorum. Mr. Superintendent, would you lead us through our agenda?
Well, the first item is the opportunity for public comment.
Would anyone from the public like to speak? Hearing none. Next item.
Next item is the report section, starting with the chairman's welcome.
I'd like to welcome everyone to our February meeting, our work session. It's hard to believe that it's February already. January seemed to have flown by. I do apologize for the late start. We had a little problems with the recording equipment, but here we are, and everything seems to be working well. Outside that, our next meeting will be our business meeting, so this is just a work session. We won't be voting or conducting any business or making any decisions tonight. This is an opportunity for the board to discuss topics that will be present before us next week. Having said that, that concludes my report, and we'll move to the next item.
The next item is the TLN representative update.
Brief and informative because a lot happened. So on January 12th, the General Assembly convened for the 112th session. It was a special session, and then it adjourned on January 22nd. There were several different pieces of legislation filed, and 4 bills will become law. And the House and Senate will be back in regular session on February 8th. So the 4 pieces that did pass, the first one is SB 7001/HB 7003, testing. So it addresses the concern about testing being used against teachers this year. And so basically what they decided was that schools will be held harmless on teacher evaluations as well as A through F school grading and priority status if 80% of students take the TCAP test. It is implied that it's going to be in person. I don't think that's 100% been established, but that's what they're assuming. The commissioner has waiver authority. There hasn't been, that hasn't exactly been defined what it's going to look like. Districts can choose how much of the assessment will count in the student's final grade. It can be 0% or up to 25%. It also updates the tenure eligibility requirements due to the lack of teacher evaluations in the past. Okay, the next one is SB 7002 HB 7004. And this involves required summer camps and 3rd grade retention. So LEAs must offer 3 types of summer camps this summer. After school summer mini camps. Okay, so the first one, sorry, let me go to the first one. No, actually, I'm gonna come back to that. Okay, all camps have to be done in person. This learning loss bridge camp is permanent, and I'll come back to that one. 2 of the camps are only for 2 summers. They are optional for students unless mandated by the board. LEAs can establish joint camps and partner with nonprofits like the YMCA. Funding is supposed to come from appropriation, LEAP funds, and TANF funds. Okay, the first type of camp is called an after-school summer mini camp. This is for rising 1st through 5th graders. It's going to be 1 hour in person for 4 days a week. It must be a licensed teacher or some type of trained individual. and students will take a benchmark. The second, just called summer camp, and that's for rising first through fifth graders. It's a 6-week program, 5 days a week. And again, it's got to be a teacher endorsed in the subjects that are supposed to be taught during that. So this camp would be 4 hours, and the other camp I discussed would be after that camp later in the day. Then running parallel to that is the third and final type of camp called a bridge camp. This is permanent. It starts every summer and will go until they make a law to change that. For summers, this summer and next summer is for rising 6th through 8th graders, and after that is for rising 4th through 8th graders. It's a 4-week program, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. And it stipulates minimum pay for teachers that will be running this camp. And there's a whole section about training tutors. And then there's also the retention of 3rd graders. So starting next school year, 3rd graders can only be promoted if they receive on-track or mastered. It does spell out, if they do not meet those, what that can look like, which could include attending one of these camps and/or having a tutor during the school year. Due to the emphasis on literacy, they also added a reading instruction test for these elementary teachers that will be teaching this literacy. And then the final bill is SB 7009/HB 7020, and that includes where the money for all this will come from and also teacher pay raises. So what questions do people have? Because this was a lot of information that happened.
Any questions for the TLN report? And Madam Recorder, if you could reflect, Ms. Harrison is present. Thank you. Any questions on the TLN report?
We want to confirm that there is no option for online testing, so that has been determined. The vendor has not been asked to provide that, and that presumably will not happen. So,
also to clarify, I'm sorry, I didn't specify this, but SB 7003/HB 7002 was the Tennessee Literacy Success Act. So I did not mention that. That's where it talks about the type of extra test a teacher will have to take. I left the name of that bill out. So there were 4.
I'll add that one has been kind of coming down the pike for a while. That's one that's been in discussion, and that the legislature's been. We had some preview of what that might look like, and was not really as surprising as some of the other things that seem to come up out of nowhere, particularly the summer school components that are significant and potentially costly, and appear to be at least largely unfunded, particularly in subsequent years, or at least there's not a plan yet. So there's kind of a number of concerns, widespread concerns, I'd say, about those bills in particular.
Also, the possibility of working with other municipalities, correct? That I know Michelle mentioned the working with the Y or something like that, but there was also the possibility of pulling our resources so that, for instance, if we worked with Arlington or Bartlett, we would have one location, but we could pull qualified personnel from there if we didn't have someone in our system who wanted to teach that particular.
In on the summer camp, it's required that LEAs offer it in some form or fashion. It is completely optional for all students to attend. About the only exception to that would be, for some students, it could depend on your third grade retention not being retained in future years if you did or did not attend this camp as an option to not be retained.
Good. Any other comments or discussion on the TLN report? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item.
Thank you. That was a great summary, by the way. We've been following some of the same webinars, I know, as many of you have, and it is confusing, and we're looking for more clarification coming soon from the Department of Education. I do have several things I just wanted to report. First of all, I do want to note it is Tennessee School Board Association Board Appreciation Week, or was last week. We're on an odd calendar every year where we usually wind up recognizing our fabulous board members during the February sessions as opposed to at the end of January, and we will be doing that next week. So we look forward to a special presentation that, under the COVID circumstances, we usually like to have the students come in and do something for you guys, but we look forward to honoring you guys next week at our board meeting. I want that to go unnoted. There's a lot going on. Just to give an update in terms of the high school construction, it continues to kind of move forward really in a way that exceeds expectations, I feel like, in terms of the block work in particular, which is definitely a critical path item. And we have had no issues with either having an appropriate number of masons or the correct kind of materials on site, so that's been encouraging. In fact, they have now hung bar joist over the first floor, which means that they're getting ready to start doing things that impact the second story of the site. There's the athletic fields on the east side of the property have been rough graded, and there are plans now being made in the short term to get the utilities laid in. I have been reassured by the contractor again that they have a plan to get the sod down no matter what, even if the lights haven't been erected or some of the things that might cause some pause that it would tear up fresh sod. They say that they can do that. They can get the sod down, let it start growing so that it would be installed in time to meet our deadline of August. That's really the main concern. It's not so much the construction, it's really just, is that sod going to have time to take so it can be used without tearing it up? And at this point, we continue to be reassured that that will not be a problem. If anyone in the community sees some dust coming from that site, the crew is going to kind of disc in, they call it, disc in some lime into the road to help dry it out so they can start putting the actual asphalt down on the road itself. So again, there's going to be a lot of activity over there, and if anyone wonders, I have contacted the neighbors over there to let them know that work could be happening and that they should not be concerned. It is totally harmless, but it could be dusty over the next few days over there. Doing a lot of work, Dr. Mitchell and I in particular, on continuing to identify vendors for things like FF&E, having exciting conversations about auditorium seating. We've identified an auditorium lighting package that will be installed on day one, as opposed to the theatrical lighting at the middle school where we kind of waited on. We're really trying to make sure that the day that the high school opens, that it's ready to do, if not everything, just about everything that we'd like students to be able to do right away. Want to give an update on our efforts, and I say our, in the municipal superintendents in particular, to get our teachers and staff vaccinated. We are working together. We're in very close contact with the health department, with the joint task force. We're now working with representatives from Le Bonheur and the UT Health Science Center, who are advising on best practices for actual vaccine distribution on site. And specifically, Lakeland School System is partnering with Arlington Community Schools and Millington Municipal School District to offer, under a formal partnership, Arlington High School as a vaccination site that would be used for our teachers and staff as well. There is no timeline, and I want to be clear on that. We've got no assurance of when Phase 1B might go into effect. The best guess would be at least early March. I wouldn't anticipate any sooner than that. But our goal is to make sure that everything possible that we can have in place very day that vaccine becomes available, that we're not trying to figure those things out then. So I do want to commend and thank Valerie Speakman, the Arlington Community Schools Council, who has basically negotiated the MOU with the health department on behalf of not only the three systems, but also Germantown and Collierville, which will partner as a site at Collierville High School, and then Bartlett City Schools will use Bartlett High School as a site. Again, we don't know the timing, but we are trying to do all the legwork that we need to do now. Yes, sir.
One clarifying question, and again, it's not our property, so I'm not as concerned, but everything that I've heard is once you partner with the health department as a distribution site, anyone can show up. And again, I'm asking this question, probably am answering it myself. We don't have to have any worries about that for us, though, because it's not at our property.
I hesitate. Here's what I know for sure. If we partner with them as a site, it has to follow the protocols and procedures of the Shelby County Health Department vaccine distribution, protocol or something like that. I can tell you that we will have the ability to set the appointments, that we will have the ability to prioritize our employees. I think I think you may be correct that if there's extra vaccine, or appointments that are unfilled, then some of those protocols do take over. But I do know that we'll have the opportunity to set those appointments for our staff. Yep. I want to say again, I know certainly you guys have all, I've announced this as a previous board meeting, but it was very exciting to have it formally announced that Lakeland School System was named an exemplary access district in the state of Tennessee, based on the excellent work under the SPDIG grant, that again, I can't emphasize enough, was Assistant Superintendent Angie DeLoso's baby, really, and she came to me at some point and said, this would be good for our school system, and I think we would qualify, and I said, this looks like a lot of work for you in particular, because it is. It's a 2-year kind of commitment, and there were a lot of people involved, and they all did a great job, and just really proud of that team. Really what that grant is about and what the recognition is about is systems that say, we want to make sure every single student in our system is getting what they need. And we know that Lakeland School System, just empirically and quantifiably, is a high-performing school system. I think it would be easy to understand if folks just wanted to focus on those high flyers, and this grant says, focusing on everybody. We can do our very best teaching to everybody, no matter what their background is, and I think it just speaks highly of the work that's being done here and the folks that are doing that work. So kudos to everybody. Budget preparations are underway. The board has approved the budget timeline, and we'll begin having real meetings in earnest this week about what that budget looks like, just for the board and the community. We're in the situation now, in reality, where we start looking at what does a budget look like for a school system that's growing into a high school, and what does that mean? And I know we've talked about a number of things like, and I think we have consensus, and we'll bring a job description, but of hiring a vice principal and a guidance counselor 1 year early that can begin really laying that groundwork for when we open in 2022 with our 9th graders, and then can constantly be kind of leapfrogging into the next year and years. So in addition to the walls going up, we're real close to, starting to identify the people that are going to really be taking the lead, along with Mr. Adler in that great new facility. So I think a lot of exciting conversations and things to come. Sometimes the budget conversations aren't the exciting ones; they're the the difficult ones. But I think we're definitely doing the work in earnest there for sure. I wanted to announce that registration for next year, which we're already talking about and looking at, will open Tuesday, March 2nd, and close on March 26th. It will be all virtual once again. We talk a lot about things that may never come back after the pandemic, and in-person registration may just be one of those, because it was really smooth. We felt like our numbers were as good as they've ever been, and we really were forced to kind of, I can't say perfect, but certainly improve the online system and address the concerns that had probably kept us from ever doing that before. So excited about that and getting a handle on what the numbers look like for next year. I did want to note they've made a number of headlines about the governor's lifting of some athletic restrictions in terms of attendance. We are still under the TSSAA, and for the most part, especially since we don't really have a lot of inside spring sports, it doesn't impact us so much. It does open up, gives a little more opportunity for larger family groups to gather, but we do still have to honor a certain level of spacing and things at events. But just to make everybody aware of that. And that concludes my report. It's strange not to say. I want to again commend everybody, administration and staff that are dealing with COVID-19 and dealing with cases and quarantines and the kind of things. We are seeing a downtick in those numbers that I think reflects the communities and the national downtick in those numbers, but it's certainly still something that we're having to adjust for and adjust to every single day. So again, everybody's doing a great job. The financial reports, as usual, will be available for the actual board meeting.
Any questions for the superintendent? Ms. Childs?
You decided, or I don't know if you're at the point you're ready to announce the testing schedule, because there were some parents asking about.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that up. What it looks like is, and we will be, intend to go public with this soon, so parents can make plans. Based on the social distancing requirements, based on the staffing requirements to give standardized tests, our team, really led by Tammy Beauvais, who's the district assessment coordinator, has decided that at the middle school only, has decided and convinced me as well, at the middle school only, the students will have to be split into two different groups, and there will be 1 week where Group A, which is 2 grades, come in and take their tests that week, and then the next week, Group A would stay at home. I'm sorry, Group B would stay home the first week, and the next week they would flip-flop, and Group B would come in and Group A would stay at home. There's just really no way else to do it. We think certainly there's some irony there in that a lot of the folks that are pushing for in-person instruction are also pushing for the standardized tests, which I don't think are helpful, and the board has expressed are not the right thing to do this year. But in order to make that happen, those students are going to have to miss some in-person instruction. They would be provided with basically the equivalent of DCI assignments, because we won't be able to do remote teaching while we have the number of staff that we need administering the test. So some announcements about that are imminent, and thank you for reminding me to speak to that.
Follow up to that, the dates for those, we'll also have those. Do you have a timeline for when you think we'll be able to release logistics for that Group A, Group B, as well as the dates?
It'll be this week.
Okay.
We'll be able to get that out this week.
No, I missed the first part of the meeting, so my apologies, and I don't know if y'all talked about it when the TLM report came up, but, so I heard you mention it has been confirmed that there is no option for virtual testing. It must be in person, is that correct? We have meetings lined up with lawmakers, and I think this board has expressed emphatically that it is very frustrating that they want us and expect us to have in-person learning this year, and have expressed, even at the governor's level, that we should have in-person learning. But in order to accommodate the pandemic situation, we now have to force children to online learning. So I certainly intend to express those things to our legislators, and I'm quite taken aback that they want in-person learning, but then they want to force us into a situation that now doesn't allow for in-person learning. So I hope members of the public and everybody else will express the concern and displeasure. And quite frankly, I'm really disappointed in the direction they're taking and not understanding what the consequences of their actions are, because that's really and truly what I feel like it is they aren't considering the consequences of now can't have your cake and eat it too during this pandemic situation, 100%, meaning we can't have in-person learning and be able to have all students in the building at the same time and do the testing and have these supervisory whatever that we need to have in order to meet all these standards as well. So I certainly intend to express it to the lawmakers, but I also want as many people, possibly public watching, whomever, to express the same concern and displeasure, because I think it's ridiculous that we're trying to force a test instead of making sure kids are in the school learning, which has been expressed by at least this board, and I think boards across the state of Tennessee, that in-person learning is best for students.
Also, to piggyback on that, my understanding of the new legislation that was just passed was that parents who chose, for whatever reason, it could have been extreme health situations at their home, who chose remote learning, that the only way for their student to participate in testing is to come in person. So it would probably not be most likely the majority of remote students are going to opt out of testing, because otherwise they would feel comfortable coming to school for whatever reason they chose that. And so if a school district doesn't get 80% participation, then they would indeed be penalized.
That's my understanding as well. Yeah.
Burnett.
We're on tirades.
My apologies.
I'll express my extreme displeasure with our legislature over the fact that we're even doing testing this year. Because of the social distancing requirements and all those, the students are not going to be taking the same test in the same environment that they would. So this test is an exercise in futility. It will not create a baseline. It will not create trend line data. It will create anomalous data that school systems are going to be held accountable for. You can say it's not going to be held accountable all day long in the law, but it's going to reflect on school systems, and negatively in some cases. I don't think it will for Lakeland school systems, the 80% issue notwithstanding. But it's an exercise in futility, so someone can say, yippee, look at me, I held school systems accountable. When we do an excellent job locally of holding ourselves accountable, holding you accountable, that's our job as a school board. And it's a waste of taxpayer money and time, and students and teachers and staff. It's a waste of their time.
Mr. Burnett, just to clarify, because I don't know that many parents and people that aren't in the building regularly will understand why you have to have a Section A and Section B, why only half the kids can be in the building. We're doing it every day. And can you explain that to everybody? Because I think that's an important process.
So in addition to having just kind of, students that are sitting in a room being proctored that have, specific requirements for staff members, you also have a number, and this is really kind of where the rubber hits the road, of what they call small group testing. Small group testing may be students that have accommodations because they're English learners. It may be students that have some sort of exceptional need where they have to have the test read aloud to them. They may be students that need extended time, or just students that have physical accommodations at some point. So there are a number of things that it may be 2 or 3 students that's in a room. So that room's done. Nothing else is happening in that room. Kind of our whole model is based on rooms where you can put a lot of students possibly working independently, but you can't do that if you've got to have these rooms available. So at the end of the day, and it also has to do with the environment that you're going to test someone in. At the end of the day, the math just doesn't add up when they look at the number of rooms, the number of proctors, and some of these small groups need multiple proctors, in fact, and the number of students that you have available, and the math doesn't add up.
So at the elementary school, only 3rd and 4th graders would be taking the test. Is the situation there going to be okay with the small groups that are necessary there, to not have to adjust or have people stay at home or anything like that in order to test all of those kids? I know they're in their classroom and they're distanced the way they are, but regarding the smaller groups, the kids with IEPs or 504s or certain assistance they need taking the test, do we have enough space to accommodate those two grades of testers?
We do, yes, we do. And part of it is the elementary school is just much bigger physically. I mean, we have many more classrooms than we have at the middle school, frankly.
I think another thing too, we're February 1st today. We don't know any more today than we knew last February 1st what we were facing. We don't know what the situation is going to be at the end of April, 1st of May, whether we're in a worse situation because of the variants or, you know, if the vaccine is slowed down or whatever. So then if you have a whole group of kids who have to be excluded because of exposures, or staff, if we have one of those really bad staff times, I think the legislators need to know that worst case scenario is we think we've got the 80% plus, but then we don't, and we don't know that until the day of reporting. So that's, I think, another thing that we need to say is we don't know what the situation's going to be, what is going to be going on regarding COVID at that point. And it's such a stressor. The uncertainty is such a stressor in and of itself, and I just think it's terribly unfair to ask this of our teachers when, I mean, they're used to adjusting, but this is a huge stressor, and I agree with you. There will be data. Whether the data counts or not, there will be metrics out there that reflect on us one way or another. And that's not fair for the teachers to have to carry that load.
We've been real upfront about this. We've had good weeks and bad weeks, and we've had 2 terrible weeks, really, that I'd consider kind of, 1 week periods. What does it look like if it's a testing day and you have 7 staff members that are out?
Right.
Which has been kind of our worst day at one school. What kind of adjustments do you have to make, and what kind of environment are you working in for those circumstances?
You don't have the proctors you need, then you don't have the ratio you need, you don't have the staff member and the possibly parent proctor or whatever the situation
Well,
may be.
that's a question I have too. I know we aren't allowing volunteers currently because of the COVID situation. What would we, volunteer proctors, or are we still sticking with staff proctors due to the COVID pandemic? Has that been decided or fleshed out at this point?
We haven't discussed any changes to the Safer at School plan.
We at the day at which, for example, there were 7 staff members out, we would not be able to say, hey, we need 7 parent volunteers, because we do not this year due to the pandemic. So that's another great,
Correct.
a call on our normal volunteer proctor situation.
That's a great point. Mm-hmm.
We do have, I'm going to add a item to our agenda later on. We'll get to that when we get to the approval of agenda, but it's another resolution that discusses this matter a little bit further. But just to clarify, you do not have the ability to decide not to take the test. That's a state mandated requirement as of today, as a result of our current state legislature. So we will do our best to take the test in a way that keeps our kids and staff safe and go from there. As Ms. Harrison said earlier, I'm looking forward to our discussions with legislatures, but truthfully, I don't expect it to change. I don't expect really any scenario where we don't take this test at this point in time. I don't have any reason to believe there's any momentum surrounding that, but you never know. So we'll go, and I do agree with Mr. Burnett that I don't know how useful the data will be. We don't have accurate data, or the data that the state currently has is at least 2 years old at this point, and to compare the data from this test to anything seems a bit of a stretch at this point in time. But regardless, I think we've discussed this topic thoroughly. And I will open the floor back up to see if there are any questions on the superintendent report. Any other questions for the superintendent? Ms. Harrison?
I do have one question. What is about the leak, when we had the water issue where it got into the gymnasium? What's the expected replacement? Will that be over the pool, or what is the thought on replacing the gym floor?
Great question, and Mr. Adler is here. I won't put him on the spot, but he has been monitoring that extremely carefully. For those who aren't aware, we did have some bad rain, and due to the new foundation being poured just outside of the gymnasium area, we did have some water that broached the gym floor. I will say Chris Woods Construction and their partner Service Masters were there that night to take care of it, and also want to commend our custodial team and plant manager Sylvester Parker, who made everybody that needed to know aware of it that night. They've done a lot of drying remediation, and they do have they've sealed the area, so there should not be any more water getting in, and there has not been lately. They've done a lot of remediation. There are some areas that are not on the playing surface of the gym floor, where there is some cupping, is what they call it, not quite buckling, but some cupping. They believe that they can take care of that with sanding, and if it is not to our satisfaction that they can, we will talk about replacement of some of the boards, but right now, we feel like, and I think Mr. Adler agrees, the prognosis is pretty good for just some minimal repair. Regardless, it's not, it's not on us. Fortunately, it would be on the contractor, but we're optimistic.
I think during summer, so that it doesn't interfere with the school day or whatever we have going on, or spring break, is that kind of, when are we,
It's a small enough area that I don't think it would be very
Okay.
disruptive
Okay.
at any point, but they do tend to look towards, I think they wanted to keep an eye on it for a bit longer. Spring break would likely be a good option, but they haven't nailed that down yet.
Questions for the superintendent? Hearing none, next item.
Next item is the approval of the agenda, which is not relevant for a work session tonight, I don't believe. Is that right?
Fine.
Okay. Nor is the consent agenda. We'll move on to the discussion items. The first discussion item is the approval of minutes from January 11th, 2021.
Any discussion on this item? Any objection to carrying this item over to our consent agenda? We'll carry this item over to our consent agenda. Next item.
Next item is one we carried over from January. That is the signing of the code of conduct by board members. This is something our board members are asked to do per policy. I did not have it before you at last month's meeting, so it is before you now. And if board members could simply sign that, and Ms. Millspaw can collect that at the end of the night. And we mainly just put this as a record that has been taken care of, and we'll place that in your files.
Members, if you would take just a minute to do that now, and then we'll turn those into Ms. Millspaw at the end of the meeting. They look around, it looks like everybody has completed that task, so we'll move to the next item.
Next item is discussion action on the update to policy 5.302, sick leave.
To speak to this item, Dr. Horrell.
Well, last month, Ms. Millspaw could not be with us, and we had a discussion about the updated sick leave policy that has to do with COVID-19, and there was a question about the definition of individuals in there that would cause someone to qualify for COVID if they were caring for individuals. No, am I on the wrong one?
You are.
Oh, I'm
There's
so
a
sorry.
COVID administrative leave policy right behind us, but this is the sick leave policy.
So sorry, I apologize. I got ahead of myself. 5.302 for sick leave. This was one that was just in the standard TSBA updates. It was a recommended change based on changes in the law.
Discussion on this item from the board? Hearing none, any objection to carrying this item over to our consent agenda? Hearing no objection, we'll carry this item over to the consent agenda. Next item.
You guys remember what I was saying about 5.302? If y'all could apply that to 5.3052. This is the one that Ms. Millspaw clarified. Individual in this case, we went ahead and added the language that There it was. We added on section 4 under paid sick leave, at the discretion of the superintendent or designee. So really, the concern is caring for an individual subject to an order described in. What Millspaw pointed out is that this is in the LSS staff safety plan. It is clarified what individuals are covered in there, which between the new language about the discretion of the superintendent and it being in an official document, I'm hopeful that that would kind of satisfy the concerns there. It also gives us some administrative ability to clear it up in the staff safety plan if necessary. But in the staff safety plan, Ms. Millspaw has highlighted, if you are caring for an individual who is diagnosed with COVID-19 who otherwise cannot care for themselves, you will need to provide a statement from the individual's healthcare provider. Only care for immediate family members or someone who regularly resides in your home qualifies for paid leave under this provision. So,
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, any objection to carrying this item over to our consent agenda?
actually wouldn't have to, since it's already been approved. We brought it back because there were just some questions about, do we need to further clarify?
Just remind, did we do, I don't remember if we did that. We did, we approved, I remember now. We approved it.
We approved it.
And
It's
we
been-
brought it back. You're right.
That's my recommendation, but obviously we're open to, if you think it requires further clarification, it wouldn't hurt my feelings, but I think having it in the staff safety plan.
You comfortable with this language? Looks like we're good. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on update to policy 6.313.
Oral?
This is, 6.313 is discipline procedures. This one is also in front of you.
Online.
I think that one is. Do we?
Not looking at it?
Online, but we don't have a printed copy.
It's like paragraph or line 4 on the second page is the change.
There are several. if you keep
Starting with
scrolling.
line 4 on the
Yeah,
second page.
Is it on? I had to hit
corresponds to the
refresh.
code
I'm
of
sorry.
conduct.
I had to hit refresh. That was late breaking. Okay, yes, it is online. Basically, this is one where the legislature says that your discipline policy has to include how your discipline is responsive to trauma, your discipline policy, and we use the response to intervention, multi-tiered systems of support, and the behavior intervention plan. So this is kind of one we just had to clean up our existing policy to reflect that.
Discussion on this item?
Well, I just have a clarification question. We received this on our printed stuff. This is 6 point. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clear on.
Yeah, that's the next thing I wanted to, these two are actually related, and
That's
this is
what I
one we
figured.
want to
Okay.
add to 6.300. You do have before you, it is not on the agenda, but it was also required that it be updated with, trauma-informed policies is what the, trauma-informed discipline. And so we would like to add this to the regular board meeting agenda as well.
I was just trying to make sure I wasn't confused.
No, thank you.
Yeah, so we're on 6.313. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, any objection to carrying this item over to our consent agenda? Hearing no objection, we'll carry this item over to the consent agenda. Next item.
Okay. We'll come back to the 6.300 if we can add that to the agenda
Right.
for the end. Next item is discussion action on update to policy 6.402, physical examinations and immunizations.
Oral?
This is another one that's just an update to the law. It makes it broader. Instead of naming the screening test, it just says as required by the Tennessee Department of Education and the Department of Health. I think the idea being that if your policy just covers everything that's required, you don't have to update the policy as often with specific items.
Discussion on this item?
Well, no, it says that the superintendent has to ensure that it happens. I think in, kind of a by any means necessary, which
Right.
often means delegation. In this case, it's the medical records clerks and the coordinated school health coordinator that takes care of that.
Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, any objection to carrying this item over to our consent agenda? Hearing no objection, we'll carry this item over to the consent agenda. Next item.
Next item is policy 6.500, special education students. This is just a TSBA recommended update based on changes in the law, Tennessee rules and regs.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, any objection to carrying this item over to our consent agenda? Hearing no objection, we'll carry this item over to our consent agenda. Next item.
Item is discussion action on update to the 2021 school fees list.
Dr. Horrell?
This is a requested addition to add baseball and softball fees, our two newest sports at Lakeland Preparatory School. These are fees for $300 each for baseball and softball.
Any discussion on this item? Ms. Harrison?
Just for clarification, I don't think it's an issue now, but in the future, will we need to designate 6 through 8 or designate the difference between the high school, because it will all be Lakeland Preparatory School. So at some point, I think we'll need to designate the difference between the high school and the middle school fees. I don't know that it's necessary right this minute, but going forward, I think we'll have to put some differentiation there.
I think that's a great point. I think you could add MS for middle school and HS and have a middle school softball fee and a high school softball fee, for example. Very good point. Yeah.
Any other comments? Hearing none, any objection to carrying this item over to our consent agenda? Hearing no objection, we'll carry this item over to our consent agenda. Next item.
Next item is a assessment of facilities planning for next year based on policy 3.208. With the board's approval, I'd like to do that at the actual board meeting.
Any discussion on this for any reason? Hearing none, we'll carry this item over.
Next item is, this is an annual agenda item, the legislative agenda new items, which is typically just an opportunity for board members that perhaps want to add or change items on the legislative agenda. I can say, if I may, Ms. Childs, that I feel like most of the concerns that have been brought up are covered under local control, unfunded mandates, and assessment and accountability on the current legislative agenda. So I think certainly anything that happened during the extraordinary session, I think we've already covered on the board-approved agenda, but certainly if anybody wished to add or change any items, we could.
Perhaps under this item on the agenda, it might be appropriate to take up. I believe the board has a proposed resolution that was drafted by the Germantown Board of Education relating to some bills that were passed during the special session. I think it falls under this item. If there's no objection, we can talk about this now. I believe everyone was emailed a draft of this earlier today, and you have it before you. We've been asked by the Germantown Board of Education to see if we'd be interested in co-sponsoring this resolution, co-signing on the resolution. And I have reviewed it, and I don't see any issues with it, and I believe that I support the language that's presented in here and would like for the board to to look at it, and let's discuss this and see if there's any. We've already sort of discussed a lot of the items in here earlier during the superintendent report. It relates to the 80% participation on the TCAP, TN Ready, along with some other items, but I'd like to open it up for discussion at this time. Mr. Burnett.
I had a chance to read through this afternoon, and probably not with the level of detail that an attorney does, but I agree with it as I've been able to read through. I'd like to add, it would have been my preference to add additional stronger language about canceling the test overall this year, but as I think I agree with what you said earlier, there's probably not an appetite at the state to do that, so bang your head against a wall, but all you have is a bloody head.
Childs, I know you've spent some time looking at these bills. Do you have any concerns or thoughts relating to the resolution?
We brought up earlier, might be, we may want, such as, it was brought up that during the weeks that we would administer the test, we could have staffing shortages that would then affect our ability to get to 80%. And if that's already on there, let me know. And we could also have a certain amount of students sick or quarantined during their testing dates that would also affect that. And I think particularly at our school, at one of our schools, students would have to be in person learning for a week, or I guess at least 3 days, since the DCI is remote kind of. So I think maybe pointing out some of the unique things that, well, it may not be unique to our district either, I'm not sure.
I have kind of asked, I'm not aware of other districts that are going to have to take that measure at the middle school, really just based on space available, so.
Other two issues for
The
sure.
other two issues are
you know,
universal, I feel certain.
I
Yeah.
don't know, I can't remember if those are addressed or not, but
Well, and the other issue was related to that was, there's no definition really of the waiver or the reasons why a waiver might be granted, what would qualify you for a waiver, because the waiver, I think the language was the superintendent of education, right, would the commissioner, right, would be the one who would decide if a waiver would be granted, and there was no language to explain, what sorts of metrics or reasons would be used for that. And then the other issue was the categorization of students who would be affected by the camps, who would be affected by the possibility of retention, and the fact that have 4 levels. You have below, approaching, on track, and mastered. And the below and approaching categories were like 60, there were 63%, right, of the students who took the 2018-2019 school year, 63% of third graders did not achieve level 3 or level 4. And then the argument is, but that doesn't mean that, it's not the same as grade level. And so that's an awful lot of kids that you're lumping into the idea of they're not ready, or they're not prepared, or they're not grade level, but that doesn't include anything regarding the teacher's experience with them in the classroom. And so that was the other big issue too. That was questioned on this proposal by the Germantown Board of Education.
I can just share, there's a tremendous lot of concern statewide that, we hear that statistics that say if third graders can't read at grade level, what that predicts. It has, high correlation with graduation rates and even incarceration rates and other, issues of legitimate concern. However, what also seems to be clear is that the TCAP is not a literacy test. That it's two different things to say, a student cannot read on grade level, and a student was approaching or below on the TCAP, even in the TCAP English section. And so it's not a literacy test, and there's not necessarily a correlation between how students perform on that test and how they perform on actual literacy tests, which again, that one's not.
Well, tell us, if you happen to know the statistics, what percentage of our students are currently complete?
Yes, 3 through 8. So I've got it by school, but you can get it pretty close. At LES, we have 16% of our students learning remotely, and at LPS, we have 14.7% of our students learning remotely. So the total, that's not 3 through 8 though. That's the total population. I don't have it broken down by grade. The average is going to be around 15, or so.
So if 5% of our students, staff, whatever, were quarantined for whatever reason, then we don't hit the 80% benchmark if we even aren't allowed to have, if those children who are remote for whatever their personal reasons are, their family's reasons, health issues, whatever, if 5% on testing, if those 15 don't come, and then on 5% on testing day, we don't hit the 80%. I mean, that's pretty staggering amount, because let's just say during a normal non-pandemic time, during a bad flu outbreak, we could potentially and have had, in some instances, more than 5% of the school out on a given week or day or whatever, and staff members too. So it's not hard to imagine a scenario where we hit that 5% number, assuming those 15% won't come in person due to their personal health issues. That alone right there is risk for our school system, to be in that below 80% mark and not be able to get a waiver because there are no standards for what that waiver is.
It's always dangerous to speculate, but my guess would be that they left the waiver language vague to give them flexibility on when to grant one and when not to. It's hard to anticipate every potential issue or reason, so I'm just speculating there. But as it relates back to the bill or the proposed resolution, forgive me, I've read it several times now, and I think it broadly addresses all of our concerns. I think there's merit in go ahead, Ms. Harrison.
Are TCAP 3 through 12 or 3 through 8? Is it all under the TCAP umbrella?
It is all under the TCAP umbrella.
Okay.
That's
I just want to make sure we're all talking the same language at all.
I know that because when they switched the name to TN Ready, TN Ready was just a labeling of TCAP, which is the Tennessee Comprehensive Assessment Program. So that's what it's called in Tennessee.
Make sure we're talking the right. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I would just.
The only other thing I would add is I do think there's value in all of the boards signing off on something. We can all obviously do our own thing, pass our own resolutions, but I think it adds a little more weight, a little more credibility to the resolution if you're able to get multiple LEAs on board with it. And for that reason, and for the language currently in the resolution, I'd support passing this resolution.
Town did a really great job collapsing so much information into two major issues: the 80% and the fact that, like you stated, it's not a literacy test. It's one metric used to see how kids are doing, and it alone should not be the determining factor to decide if they get retained. So, great job for Germantown, and I've read it several times as well, and I would love to sign on.
This section, and I don't know, this is certainly, I approve of, and I agree with the intent, and I'm trying to read, and maybe I'm missing it, where it addresses the potential quarantine issue. I know it talks about the remote learners having to come in school, but does it address that specific issue that, that there are quarantine issues that last for 2 weeks. I mean, you know,
I didn't see it in there.
Well, in the proposed solution, it does say significantly lowering or eliminating any required in-person TCAP testing participation percentage for the 2021 school year.
I was saying as part of the justification for saying we would want to lower or eliminate the in-person is the potential quarantine. I have no issue with approving with the language that it has, but I also was potentially wondering if language could be added for that reason as well, that could have students on quarantine or whomever on quarantine for 2 weeks, or cohorts of students, not just a student, but a cohort of teachers or students that end up in quarantine is yet another reason that would put you, where it talks about that 80%. So, I mean, I understand the intent, but that's just another reason why you couldn't get to the 80%. So as part of the justifying how you can't get to the 80% potentially, that's a reason to add in there.
Certainly don't have any objection to adding proposed language to it. And
It seemed to be invited by the email that was forwarded
Right.
to me. I do want to point out I'm happy to respond on behalf of the board members. It did come from a board member to the board chairman, so at some point, I just want to make sure if there are suggestions that need to be made. He certainly made it sound like individuals could respond to him, or if you'd like me to respond on your behalf, since we had a board meeting, I'm happy to do that.
There's no objection. I mean, potentially, could we request some update if they minded adding that language, if they would be on, and bring it back to next week with a little bit of strengthening there with that? Is there any, I don't have an objection to.
I certainly don't have any objection. Dr. Horrell, would you mind taking a stab at it and then bringing it back to us Monday?
Just in terms of timetable, do you want me to bring the language back to you on Monday and then give it to Germantown, or?
I
do y'all
think we
wanna-
go ahead and give Germantown a heads up of what,
I think they're trying to get,
yeah.
One
Let's go ahead and give
resolution
Germantown a heads up of the proposed change that we would like to make. But go ahead and bring it back to our board.
it's possible they may get other feedback and they may have a completely revised,
I'm certain.
resolution in a week. So how about, I will try to write up that concern that Ms. Harrison articulated, send it to them as a suggestion from our board, let them know we have a board meeting next Monday and could possibly approve it at that time. So we'll get an updated one.
It may get to a point where we just approve it in principle, because depending on what every other board does, there could be multiple changes, but at least this gets the ball rolling. Item, Dr. Horrell.
Next item, if, with the board's permission, I would like to discuss, add an agenda item, which is 6.300 Code of Conduct.
Before we get there, we've got Review Policy Manual, Section 5.
That's fine, we can go ahead and, yeah, sure. Review of the Policy Manual, Section 5.
I
first
don't
tab.
believe there's any discussion on that item.
Good for now.
Hearing no discussion, well, Dr. Horrell, what's the agenda item you'd like to add?
6.300 Code of Conduct.
Any objection to adding this item? Tonight's work session. Hearing no objection, Dr. Horrell, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, this is another one I alluded to previously. Forgive me. This is actually goes hand in hand with the trauma-informed discipline. This used to be just kind of a one-liner, and we have added the information that's specific to our RTI squared B, multi-tiered system and support, and behavior intervention plans. So this we feel like meets the criteria for the new state requirements, that be part of conduct and behavior policies.
Any discussion on this item? This is a current policy, so it's just an amendment, even though it's a very significant amendment to the policy.
That's right.
Hearing no discussion, any objection to carrying this item over to our consent agenda? Mr. Burnett?
If I could have another,
Sure.
just a second more, and probably a question. Dr. Horrell, the only one that gives me initial pause is reading the first one. Balances accountability with understanding of traumatic behavior. I don't want to set us up where we're excusing actions based on traumatic behavior. And while I understand and appreciate that there are occasions when students are exposed to traumatic childhood events, adverse childhood events, and that predicates a lack of a decision-making with consequences associated. But at the same time, I don't want to set a situation up where we're excusing behavior without accountability when that behavior could potentially impact others' safety, well-being. And so, does this policy change give you any pause toward that?
It doesn't. In fact, I kind of like the language there that it balances accountability with an understanding. I feel like this is something our counseling department does very well and that the RTI squared B program emphasizes. So in a lot of ways, this really just kind of, I think writes up something we've been recognized at the state for multiple years now, and that's I think consistent and successful implementation of an RTI squared B program. It doesn't. I don't feel like I know Mr. Adler hasn't had a chance to review, but I don't feel like it negates any of his or my authority to basically uphold our discipline procedures. I appreciate you making the point, and it's a supportive comment to make by you, and I appreciate that. I know Mr. Adler and Ms. Lockhart do too, but I don't feel like this would hamstring us at all in terms of taking actions that would be appropriate.
Harrison?
Just for clerical purposes, there's a 2 referenced in there. If we could get the list of what that ties to. Quickly note what that's to, and I believe there's a period missing at the end of line 4. If there's not a 1, should there be a 2? So just clerically, if we could straighten those up.
Further comments or discussion? Do we have any objection to carrying this item over to our consent agenda with those clerical changes? Hearing no objection, we'll carry this item over. Next item.
There are no further items on the agenda.
Are there any announcements?
We have Teachers of the Year, right?
Thank you for bringing that up. We do have Teachers of the Year, 2 wonderful teachers, Jessica Bailey at Lakeland Elementary and Candace McGuire at Lakeland Preparatory School. And I will announce for the first time publicly, I was going to let some time go, but since he's here, we might as well do it. We also have a nominee who has been selected for Principal of the Year that will be submitted to the state and the state Principal of the Year competition. Ms. Lockhart is not eligible, so I'll give you 3 guesses as to who it is. We want to, but in all, you only need 2 guesses, right? In all seriousness, we have submitted Mr. Adler. This is actually his first year of eligibility. You're required to serve as a principal for 3 years prior to a nomination. And even if we had 50 principals, I'd say Mr. Adler is very deserving of this recognition. He's been nothing short of remarkable during the COVID-19 pandemic for sure, and the work that he and his staff have done in terms of student achievement in the first 3 years, getting Reward School and many other accolades is really nothing short of exceptional. We all know, Mr. Adler would probably agree, Ms. Lockhart gets a lot of attention for all the wonderful things she's done for so many years and was extremely deserving to be the West Tennessee Grand Division Principal of the Year. But we're very excited to put Mr. Adler's name forward this year. So congratulations to him as well.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Mr. Adler. Are there any other announcements? Hearing none. Mr. Burnett, would you? Oh, Ms. Childs.
I was just going to say as a reminder, as of this evening, I was able to get scheduled meetings with 5 legislatures. So check your email and email myself and Dr. Horrell, so we just kind of know who to expect is going to jump on the which Google Meet or meeting that we're having. So we can prepare for that, but
I know in one of the emails I saw, there was space here to be able to have those in person, is that right? One of them, the
Yeah,
rest are.
just one
okay.
meeting. The rest are Google
Okay.
Meets, yep.
Good, thank you, Ms. Childs. Any other announcements or concerns? Mr. Burnett, would you be kind enough to make a motion to adjourn, since you voted against adjournment last time?
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
I.
Any opposed?
This time.
We are adjourned.
I should have had a presentation ready for our new AD and new coach, right?